Hi folks, me again with part 2. Now, as I said in the last one, Frank Dukes is writing for Frank Pilato now, articles. In return, Frank Pilato wrote an article supposedly verifying Frank Dukes' story about his teacher. Frank Dukes, of course, is using this to say, hey, I have been verified by an independent journalist. This is proof. Okay. Let's deal with that. Now, first of all, finding someone with the name Chris Smith in America is no big deal. Finding someone with the name of Senzo Tanaka, it really doesn't impress me. I want proof that they were within 50 feet of each other, because there's no proof, as I said, that I can find or that Frank Duke seems willing to produce to anyone that dares question him. Well, so, in addition to this, Frank Pilato is saying that, well, there are records in Japan confirming that Senzo Tanaka was an intelligent agent for the Japanese government before World War II. And I'm like, oh, really? Because again, I can't find those records in any Japanese sources. Now, this is where it gets kind of funny. Frank Pilato is referencing a book, quasi-book, by a guy named Chris Basha. Now, this book really doesn't exist because it's crap. It's a PDF file running around on the internet. I have a friend named Baron Shepard, and he found out he was going to be in it. He found out what was being said about him in it, and he called the guy up and said, this is full of crap. This is, you're going to get your pantsuit off. And the guy said, well, in his defense, said, well, basically all I'm just going off of what Frank Dukes told me. Oh, okay. And if you look at the bibliography of this thing, it's like there's no Japanese sources. He doesn't seem to have any Japanese ability. Never been to Japan. All of his resources are basically just from people like Frank Dukes, written down, the stuff from his website, the stuff that he's written in books and stuff like that. Frank Dukes' side of the story. So this is quite believable that Chris Basha got his information from Frank Dukes. So essentially what we have is Frank Dukes telling Chris Basha a story, Frank Basha writing a PDF file, and then Frank Pilato writing a story based on that, and now Frank Dukes is saying that this vindicates him because he's an independent journalist. There's less incest in an episode of Game of Thrones. This is not what a honest, ethical journalist does. Okay? An ethical journalist questions sources. An ethical and honest journalist checks facts beyond what happens. And again, so this is not really ethical. Moreover, in this PDF file that Chris Basha wrote, he said that these files existed in the Imperial War Museum. Now, months ago, I went on and made a video pointing out that there is no Imperial War Museum in Japan. Nothing. There is, again, they did used to use Imperial a lot, Teikoku in Japanese, Imperial Hotel, Imperial College, things like that, Imperial University. But since 1945, the whole idea of a Japanese empire is kind of, no, don't use it. So there is no Imperial Japanese Museum. There is an Imperial War Museum in England, and if you did a Google search back when I first looked, you'll come up with Imperial War Museum Japan, and you'll find like a Japanese exhibit in that museum in the UK. So, again, I pointed out, there is no Imperial War Museum. Chris Pilato, on his own, determined that what Chris Basha must have been talking about was the Yushukan. The Yushukan, who incidentally I'm going to give the English language, the link to the English language portion of its official site. The Yushukan is kind of like a treasure house for Yasukuni Shrine. You can go in, I don't mind if you call it a museum, but technically it's a treasure house of a lot of the treasures that the shrine has. Yasukuni Shrine, you might have heard about it. It enshrines the dead from the wars that Japan fought in, some of them being Class A criminals, and China raises a fit whenever one of the prime ministers goes to pay a visit. So yeah, so this Yushukan, it's an actual building there, but it's never called itself the Imperial War Museum. And again, if you look on the official English language site, because they've got a Japanese, original Japanese site, and they've got an English language site, I'm not sure about a Chinese site. But I do know that they have an English site, and you can read there. Right there, it never says anything about an Imperial War Museum. And this is the funny part, because again, months ago, if you had done a web search of Imperial War Museum Japan, you would have gotten nothing that looked anything even slightly official, saying, you know, there is an Imperial War Museum in Japan. Since that time, it looks like somebody has gone to the bother of setting up a Facebook page. And of course, you know, anyone can set up a Facebook page about almost anything until they get caught. And it's very easy to take advantage of a language barrier, to set up something in English, presenting yourself as someone in Japan. So now, there is actually a Facebook page for the Imperial War Museum Japan, parentheses, Yushukan, on Facebook. And I find this just amusing as all get out, that someone went to all this trouble. It kind of reminds me of the time that, you know, like Frank Dukes has got these testimonials, people being interviewed on YouTube, you know, saying that, you know, I was in the spec op community and Frank did this, or I was active in the Los Angeles area martial arts community and Frank did this. And until one of them got caught and he fessed up and says, no, you know, basically I was an actor and I was paid to say that. All these guys are actors being paid to say this. This is not a real interview. Oh, okay. Someone, you know, it looks like Frank went into a lot of trouble to set this up, you know, according to this guy's story. So yeah, this looks like somebody went to the trouble of, I mean, there's one guy that just keeps posting things to kind of build up this site, just to help Frank Dukes tell his story, that the Yushukan is what was meant by the Imperial War Museum. Now again, Chris Basha, never been to Japan, no Japanese ability shown. It really does look like he got his information from Frank Dukes, as he told my friend Baron Shepard. So let's cut this all out. You know, I'll reiterate this. If there are records in Japan, show me them. Don't just tell me that they exist. Don't say that, you know, you don't have to tell me, or that I have the wrong attitude. I can read Japanese. I've got friends in Japan that will do me a solid and go down and pick these things up. You have to tell me where these records are, how I can access them so I can check them for myself. If not, then, well, then you should have no trouble with me calling you a liar. And yes, Frank Dukes, you are a liar. Frank Parlato, you are an unethical journalist. You should have checked sources. You shouldn't have just gone by what Frank Dukes said by way of Chris Basha. You know, until then, my pretties, I will continue my world domination plan of destroying Frank Dukes until that happens. Good day. Right, Kitty?